Last week I did a video called CDs with Surprises, in which we looked at CDs which contained alternate takes of songs that were not publicized on the artwork. So thank you to everyone who sent comments and let me know of other CDs with surprises, especially Harold, who sent me a list of about 6 or 7, most of which I didn't know about. However, there was one CD he mentioned which I did know about, and I was actually saving that for today, because today we're going to be talking about LPs with surprises. The CD that he told me about was the Japanese version of Elvis Is Back from 1988. I think the first one came out. I have a copy here from 1991. This does have a surprise. I'm afraid it's not a very nice surprise. I'll talk about that in a moment, but the reason why I saved that CD for today is because the problem goes back to the vinyl releases of the album. This is an RCA copy from the early 70s, when the album was still known as Such a Night. There's a lot to say about this album, and I've already done a video about it, so if you haven't seen that one, please check it out. So back to the CD then. The problem is with the song Soldier Boy. As you may know, at the beginning of Soldier Boy, it has that lovely little piano arpeggio. Not on the CD version, it doesn't. For some reason, it's missing, and it's also missing from the LPs. However, by the time of the release of this CD here, the mini LP version from 2000, the problem had been rectified. This one does have the correct introduction with the piano. Moving on to another Japanese LP. If you are familiar with the regular stereo version of the On Stage album, you'll get quite a few surprises if you ever hear this one. This is the quadradisc version, 4-channel stereo. I'm guessing that the Q8 cartridge from America will probably be the same as this one. So not only do you get different mixes on this album, you also get a different running order. Some of the songs are in different positions. But what I want to talk about in this video is the differences in the spoken parts. As you know, on the album, Elvis talks a lot between songs. Some of the spoken parts are common to both albums. Some are only on the stereo album. Some are only on the 4-channel album. So let me try and summarize those for you. So at the end of CC Rider on the stereo LP, Elvis says we're recording a live album. And on the quad LP, that comment appears twice. It also appears before Walk a Mile in My Shoes. So that means on the quad LP, you don't get that line about Elvis saying his scarf's too short and his pants are falling down, etc., etc. Also on the stereo album, there's a little bit of talking before The Wonder of You. That's not on the quad LP. And on the stereo LP, there's a long interaction after Polk Saladani between Elvis and the audience. And that ends with Elvis saying, "You've already had it," talking to a woman who's trying to get another kiss out of him. On the quad LP, you do get the same interaction, but it stops before the "you've already had it" comment. You do get a couple of bits of speaking on the quad LP, which are not on the stereo, as follows. Before Proud Mary, Elvis says, "Hello, I'll give you a kiss." And in the introduction to Runaway, he talks about Del Shannon for a moment. So a lot of differences there in these spoken parts. Sticking with live albums, sticking with Japanese quadradiscs, the next one is Madison Square Garden. There are a lot of differences on this album and compared to the stereo version. Sadly, there are a few not so pleasant surprises. A couple of songs are missing. It doesn't have Funny How Time Slips Away, and it doesn't have You've Lost That Loving Feeling. It also doesn't have the band introductions, and Proud Mary starts from the 3rd verse. So a lot of music missing from that one. Staying with live albums, I've shown this before, and I've also spoken about this particular track before, but there's another reason I want to show you this copy of Aloha from Hawaii. The first Japanese one from January 1973 actually contains the wrong version of I Can't Stop Loving You, which is actually the Madison Square Garden recording. So there was a problem with the master tape that Japanese were using, sorry, the copy of the master tape that they got from RCA in America. So they had to substitute the Madison Square Garden version for the Aloha version. When they reissued it a month later, it had the correct version. But the reason why, another reason why I want to show you that album is because that copy there I just got recently. I bought it because it had this insert with it. I had no idea what this insert was, so I took a chance and bought it. And judging from the text that's written here, this was printed just a few days after the album came out, because it just mentions that the album was released very recently. Perhaps this was made by one of the fan clubs back in the day, I'm not sure. It's basically a lyric sheet with an essay there. It's got all the songs on the front with a little essay, and then on the other pages it's just got the lyrics. Some of them are missing. I'm so lonesome I could cry. Perhaps they didn't know the lyrics because it was a new song for Elvis to record. And here's another new song that I never knew Elvis recorded at all. It's called "All Got a Shackig" going on. Anybody know the words for that one? Anyway, it's nice to get that. Still don't know who produced it, but it's a nice little find. That. Now, what else has been happening? See that poster there? I've just got that one, so you won't know what that's all about. So let me tell you what that poster is about before we go any further. This poster here is actually an advertisement for a product, and it's a product called Ban. Maybe you're aware of that if you're in America or Canada. It's certainly still available in Japan. Ban is actually a deodorant. So I just saw this poster and saw, there's Elvis advertising a deodorant, and I just thought that was just so funny, I had to buy it. I'll put a picture of the logo, which is in the top corner there, which you can't see. I'll put that on screen so you can see it. And underneath the logo in Japanese, it says stopping sweat and smells. And it just made me laugh because I couldn't help thinking about the conversations that must have gone on at the company back in the day, back in the 1970s. They must have been thinking, who can we get to advertise our deodorant? We need a really sweaty guy. Who can you think of? Elvis Presley. And I think the reason why Elvis must have sprung to mind is because that's how Japanese people saw Elvis at the time in the early 70s. Live pictures of Elvis singing his heart out, sweating buckets. So perhaps he was an automatic choice. But I just thought it was really funny to see Elvis advertising a deodorant. And down in the bottom corner here, you can see it's got the Elvis on Tour logo. So I guess this poster dates back to the early 70s. Back in 1978, it was not long since Elvis had died, and people were still rushing out and buying his records all around the world. Many people certainly bought this album, Mahalo from Elvis. And I wonder how many people took this album home expecting to hear the 1961 versions of Blue Hawaii and Hawaiian Wedding Song and so on. Probably a lot of people. But these songs, as many of you will know, were actually recorded in 1973, just after the Aloha from Hawaii TV special, which Elvis recorded to include in the American version of the TV special. And it doesn't tell you anywhere on the back that these are actually 1973 versions. The only hint that you get is down here. It gives you the vocal accompaniment information. It tells you that Elvis was accompanied by J.D. Sumner and the Stamps. So any Elvis fan who knows a lot about Elvis will know that J.D. Sumner and the Stamps were not backing Elvis back in 1961. But that was the only hint that you got. It's kind of a surprise, really, because those songs would have been a big selling point. It's surprising that they didn't make more of that. A year or so after the the year after the Aloha show in the UK, we got a fine double album called Elvis's 40 Greatest, and it was a huge seller at the time. It seemed like pretty much everybody in the country had a copy of it. In Germany, they got a similar album called Elvis Forever, 32 hits. This is basically an abridged version of the Elvis 40 Greatest album. Even the running order is the same. It's just missing 8 tracks. On the one hand, you could say, well, you get less music, so it's not as good. But on the other hand, you could say, well, there's less music per side, so you should, in theory, get better sound quality. The reason why I think you would get a surprise listening to this album is because it says here stereo at the top here. So like a lot of albums at that time, you were probably expecting to hear reprocessed stereo for the 50s songs. But in actual fact, particularly on this side here, I think it's side 1, it goes back and forth between mono versions and then electronically reprocessed stereo versions. So it's very confusing. You're not sure what's coming next. For instance, Got a Lot of Living to Do is in stereo, and then the next song, Teddy Bear, is actually in mono. That's a bit of a jarring listen, to be honest. I do like that series, the Elvis Forever series. I've got 4 different volumes. I'm just missing volume 5, which is the most difficult one to find. Volume 2 here has got it's got 3 unusual things going on here, 3 surprises. The first one is I've Lost You. Given that this is a greatest hits compilation, or a hits compilation at any rate, it's kind of surprising to hear that I've Lost You is a live version. It's the same version that you can hear on That's the Way It Is. Another surprise is Love Letters. This is actually the version from 1970. It does tell you it was recorded in 1970, but unless you read the liner notes, unless you read the sleeve here, it'll probably take you by surprise when you hear it. And the third surprise, which is actually not a very pleasant surprise, is Burning Love. The introduction to Burning Love, as you know, it starts out with the guitar, and then you get the comping on the piano, but that piano is mixed right down. You can barely hear it. So I don't know why that is. So the introduction to this version is not as effective as the original version. Seem to be mostly negative surprises this week, which is a shame. I've also got Volume 4 in the same series, and there's just one surprise on this one. It's I'm Yours on side 2. That was originally released on the Potluck album, of course, in 1962, and it was later released as a single, but the single version was different because it only had Elvis singing one track. He was on the Potluck album, he overdubbed a second vocal part. This is the single version, which is a little bit surprising when you hear it. It doesn't mention that it's a single version. Staying with hits compilations, they don't get any bigger than this one, 30 number 1 hits, and this also has a couple of surprises. The first one being, in fact, they're right next to each other. The first one is A Fool Such As I, which I believe, he says, checking his notes, is take 8. And the original master take was take 9. Hank Garland's licks in take 8 are not quite as sharp, not quite as polished as they are in the master take 9. The solo's still pretty good. I think he had the solo down by that point, but the licks between the vocals not quite as slick as in the final version. And the next song on that side is a Big Hunk of Love, and that's different from the master take 2. It's this is take 3. The master was a splice of take 3 and take 4. So when you hear this version for the first time, this album, it's surprising to hear the first part of the song, because the first part of the song is different to the single version. Up to about the piano solo, it's different. Another hits compilation. This one goes back to 1983. This one came out of Holland on the Arcade label, Golden Film Hits. And there are 3 things on here that surprised me. The first one is the version of Follow That Dream. It's in stereo, it's not mono. So therefore it's not the master take, it's a different version. But still, it sounds very similar to the master take. And it's good to hear it in stereo. There's also on here, it says Kissing Cousins number 2, but in actual fact, it's Kissing Cousins, the single version. Kissing Cousins number 2 is, of course, the first song on the Kissing Cousins album, but what you hear is Kissing Cousins. And the last surprise on here, it's got Guitar Man on side 4, but the version that you get on this album is the version from the Guitar Man album, the remade version, the one that Felton Jarvis did just before he died. Sticking with movies, this album contains mostly movie songs. Almost in Love. There's just one surprise on this album. I think most fans, or many fans, will be familiar with this one, but I'll mention it anyway. It's a little less conversation. The version on this album is different to the version that was released as a single. So the LP is take 10 and the 45 is take 16. Staying with soundtracks, I've got a Japanese copy of GI Blues. So if you ever buy a Japanese copy of GI Blues, you may well get surprised when you play side 1, because the first track on this album is actually not Tonight Is So Right for Love, it's Tonight's All Right for Love. And they didn't actually release Tonight Is So Right for Love in Japan until the Elvis Sings Hits from His Movies album in the early 70s. Another soundtrack, this one coming out after Elvis died, is This Is Elvis. This one contains a couple of shortened songs. Now it does tell you the times, the track times on the LP, but who sits down and reads track times before they listen to the record? So I guess a lot of fans got a big surprise when they listened to I Got a Thing About You Baby and Promised Land on the same side. For me, it wasn't a surprise because when I first bought this album back in the 80s, I was unfamiliar with both songs. So in fact, I got a surprise when I heard the original versions later on. Another record which contains music from all 3 decades that Elvis was recording is this one here, Elvis In Demand. This is a compilation that came out of the UK, maybe unfamiliar to many of you in America, for instance. And it was basically, the songs were chosen by members of the British fan club. I don't know why these songs were settled on, were they the most popular, or who chose them, who chose the final selections, I don't know. And it's a selection of songs that were fairly difficult to get hold of in the UK at the time, either because they had been deleted or because they'd never been released in the UK. However, there's one song on here that I think is still rare even to this day. It's the version of It Hurts Me. Again, the information is here on the sleeve, but without reading the sleeve notes, it would probably come as a surprise to hear the version of It Hurts Me on here. It doesn't have any backing vocals on it. The Jordanaise backing vocals are not included. It says it's the Italian release. So what I want to know is, how did British fans even know about that? Seems like a pretty rare version. And the last one is an album that it was released in the US, but in the UK it had a different title and more songs. In America, it had the same title as the Japanese album, which is Greatest Hits Volume 1. In the UK, we had an album called The Sound of Your Cry. It had the same cover, but it had more songs on it. And there's one big surprise on this album. It's actually the title track, The Sound of Your Cry. And again, the information is here. If you look for it, it tells you that the song is 4 minutes in length. But how many people knew that the original single version was only 3 minutes and 11 seconds? So it's a surprise when you hear this one, because it contains a very long fade out with Elvis really getting into the performance. So it's a nice little surprise, that one. There you go, we're finishing on a nice pleasant surprise. Okay, so those are some albums that I've found which also contain surprises. Can you think of any others? Let me know in the comments section below. But that's it for this video. I've finally got, it's taken me about 10 times to do this video. I'm hoarse now, but I think I've got there. So that's it. Any questions, let me know, and see you next time. Thanks for watching. Cheers. In Germany, they got a similar compilation called Forever. Where's my mic? Oh man, I've got to start all over again.